I'm going to try to recap my entire lecture in one recording. This is right after class. If I go a little fast, that's fine. I am updating what we were planning on doing. My original intention was to mess with a lot of different settings. I just want you to do two different renders, one from Arnold, one from Maya, just to kind of notice the differences. So what the whole point of today's lecture was just to kind of experiment and kind of tinker around with the lights, so you get a basic understanding so that you can do the homework, which is giving me three different JPEGs of three different time scenarios based on the different lights. So it's an experimental type of class today. So if your renders aren't perfect, that's fine. I'm going to give you points for having two, one that's obvious from Arnold and one that's obvious from Maya. Here we go. So Maya software is Maya's old internal rendering. It goes a lot faster, and I'm just going to show you just the two settings right here. It goes a lot faster, but it usually has less of a quality to it. And then Arnold renderer is a thing Maya has purchased from a different company, and it renders out using like simulated photons, and it usually works better, but it's a little bit finicker with the light settings. It kind of renders dark. There's a little higher reflective. It's very sensitive to specular highlights. So whichever one you want to do for your homework is the one you can do, right? So pick a lane for your homework, but for this experiment, we're just going to try both. All right, and you can't do rendering without lights. So we're going to do a couple things here, setting everything up. This is actually going to take a bulk of the amount of time. Then once we render, the render goes pretty quickly. So here we go. The first thing we want to do is we want to do a lot of layout setup. So with rendering, you need a camera. So I'm going to go to Panel. I'm going to go to Create. I'm going to go to Camera and create a new camera. This camera is right here. She is rather small, so I'm going to go to Edit, Delete All by Type Channels, because I had her keyframed. I'm going to scale her up. I'm not sure why she's so small. That might have been causing some problems. All right, now with my camera, I'm just going to set up a nice, good camera angle. So I'm going to View, I'm going to go to Panel, Perspective, and look through my camera lens, and I'm going to move it over to the right, give a nice little 45-degree look at this, something like that. The reason why I want to have a camera set up is so that I can move around in my perspective view, and I'm going to have to mess with the lights. So going back to look at my camera, the other thing I'm going to want is a resolution gate. I'm going to go to Film, Camera Settings, Resolution Gate, and that's going to give me that. If you use Film Gate, it doesn't stick to the window settings. If I use Resolution Gate, it's going to set to whatever my render settings are, which are set to HD right now. A new feature here, you can go lock your camera, and now I can't zoom in or zoom out or anything like that. So I'm going to leave that head there, and I'm going to go to Panel, Perspective, and now I can start messing around with my lights. If I don't like seeing that camera there, I can always hit Show and turn off my camera, so now I can't see it. And now I can move around here, but my render is always, oh, you can't see, I don't have any lights yet. So let me get to that point. I jumped ahead. All right, camera. The other thing is we're going to be playing with a lot of different windows. So one thing we can do is we can kind of arrange our setup. So what I like to do is I like to have this thing called the light editor. So we are going to be in a rendering mode. So we're going to switch our menu to rendering. And there's a few things I can show you of Windows, Rendering Editors, Light Editor. And it might be free floating. Let me get these two connected first because that's how it was. And I have properties of the lights, and then I have like a light map. This is kind of like an outliner, but exclusively for lights. And I don't like it floating as a window, so if I slowly bring it off to the side here, I can have this nice list here. Another thing I'm going to need is the attribute editor. So I can grab this attribute editor and I can plop it onto this top window, and now I have these two things happening. So I'm going to need the property editor for the lights. Doesn't give you every single detail, so sometimes I need to dive in and get more details. And the other thing that was causing some problems, so I'm not going to do, was the renderer view. So if I am playing with Arnold, I can plug in a renderer view here, or if I have my IPR open, and I can set that to Maya software, which it's not going to show anything yet, I can also have that off to the side. Now what was happening was, it was seeming to cause some problems. But by closing this window and then opening it back up, I was seeming to get some better results. So I might take this off for right now. That was where I was getting the problems, is with my live render view. Okay, so I'm going to be hopping forth and pressing IPR and then closing IPR. There it is. IPR stands for photographic something, intermediate photographic realistic something or other. So let's start making some lights. The other cool thing about Light Editor is it has all your light types right here. So I could go to create lights and I have my directional light. You usually always want to start with a directional light. Or I could just clip right here and I get my first light. What I like to do when I'm setting up my lights is I like to give it a specific color. So I'm going to give my directional light a bright pink, just for now, so I can see how it's hitting the face, so I know exactly what I'm going to see. The other thing I can do is, if I want to see my lights in real time, I can press 7. This will cause a lot more this will cause a lot more render power, processor power, but this will also let me kind of see the angle that I want and everything. All right, so pressing 7 gives you the lights. If I want to turn that off, I can go to 6. If it's getting really intense, I can go to 6. There you go. If it's getting really intense, I can go to 4 and just play with my lights and then keep checking my IPR. All right, directional light, once again, either by pressing these 3 sets of arrows or create lights, is a uniform angular light. And I don't know why I have 2, because I hit IPR too early. Get in there. Oh, get those out. There you go. Directional lights is all of the photons are going the same way. So let me hit 7 now. 5, 6, 7. There you go. And so you can't really tell. Well, you can tell a little bit. These aren't shadows. This is the head blocking the light, which I know some people say, isn't that a shadow? It's different. We're going to have this vacuous space so you won't see the shadows bouncing off behind it. So typically, we consider our directional light kind of like the fill light for this type of event. And so I'm going to get it about a 35 to 45 degree angle from one side. And then what I'm going to do, just to kind of have different lights, is I'm going to add a spotlight from the opposite angle, opposite direction. So I'm going to go to lights here and choose spotlight, or I can choose that little icon right here. A spotlight is like a theatrical spotlight. It's circular. You can change this to other things. I do want it also to come down. And in TV, we call this a key light. It's meant to be like the more important light. Now there are a few settings here on spotlight. I'm going to make this one blue so I can see how it mixes with the other light. And I'm definitely going to want the spotlight to be brighter. And I'm going to, then the directional light, I'm actually going to turn down the intensity of my directional light. And so for my spotlight, I'm going to increase my, and then this is what I was getting at, is that with my spotlight on, I want to get to other attributes. So this is why I have my attribute editor also in the same tab, because this doesn't have the penumbra angle or the drop off or the decay, which I'm going to want to do all three. So I go to attribute editor, I'm going to hit decay, linear decay, and that really turns it off. I'm going to then have to increase my intensity until I can see it again. And the reason why we have decay is otherwise the light goes on infinitely and it'll be just as bright back here as it is there, but that's not like realistic light. You can play with this even more. It gets more and more dramatic, and then you have to increase the intensity for it to work, but I want linear, and now that's looking fairly well. I'm not going to play with shadows for this because there is this absence of light. And then the other thing I can do is the penumbra angle, which will soften the edges. You can see the result of what it's going to be looking like here. And I can also kind of, this is called the drop off. So I can kind of mix that up. Increase that intensity, but increase the drop off. So it becomes looking more like a spotlight. A couple other things with the light editor is on this little menu on the side. I can turn them off and on as I see fit. And then I can look through my light like so. So this tells me exactly that circles where the light's hitting. And it gives me like this very like GoPro look of what I want to look through. So looking through that light, and I can kind of, what's going on? Oh, middle mouse click. Just like with Maya, I can move it and the light moves. You can actually see it move, and I can kind of change where I want it to be. And I kind of want it to be higher, create these more dramatic light. So it's a fun way to kind of make sure, and then this way I really know where my light is hitting if I can't see it. There, that's what I want. A little bit more. There, okay. So I have this higher, yeah. Maybe, and if I want to go above the intensity of 10, I can always type this in. It's gonna be too bright. Just something like that. So directional light is going to be softer and kind of soften the shadows. A spotlight, we want to, let me go back to my attribute editor. There's also a cone angle. I can kind of widen it or close it as I see fit. I'm going to do something like that. And then maybe a little stronger penumbra. Yeah, I'm liking that. Not as much. There, drop off. There. Whew. Okay, lastly, I'm going to make an ambient light. Not ambient, I'm sorry, a point light. Create lights, point lights. Point lights are very bright. They go on forever in every single direction. And I want the point light to kind of shine over right behind the character's head. And this is called backlighting. Now, I could do a backlighting with a spotlight. I'm just showing you the different types of lights that you'd like to use. And this one is, instead of having a focused angle, this one's like a spotlight, but just hits every single 360 degree. And I'm going to change that color to green just so I can see how they're mixing. I'm going to change these colors eventually in a second, but I just want to see how they're hitting so that I know that this is the ambient light. I'm going to get it off center a little bit. I'm going to go back to my camera and I'm going to hit IPR. See what that looks like. It's looking pretty good. I have, all right, a couple things that happen here. One, I can see the inside of her head a little bit from the directional light. I could build eyes and a mouth, but if you wanted to just quickly cheat, and if you don't have that kind of time, you hit sphere, and you can make a very dark sphere just kind of in the middle, just kind of help block out the light from shining on the inside of that character. So I'm going to make a nice dark color here, and I'm going to pull that up like so. I'm going to move it around, and here. If you want, you can parent it so that it, it's like this guy, and parent it so that way if I do rotate this later, it'll be there. And now her eyes won't look so transparent. Oop, I can still see that part. So I can, again, grab that light, that one inside, move it off to the left. Get a little close. Make sure it's not poking through. Okay, how about now? Just so you're not seeing like the inside of their face. And if it's still giving you trouble, I'm going to go back to my panel perspective and actually model it a little bit. Got my edge here. I have soft select on just to kind of blank that out. Get it a little bit more. Something like that. Let's see. other things to point out and look for. Now let's see what it's going to look like. IPR. IPR. Okay, close enough. I'm okay with a little bit of showing. All right, can I just move it over? Poking through. It's lopsided. It'll work. Something like that. Spending too much time on it. Boop, boop, boop. Want to make sure it's not poking through. Perfect. All right. This is 3-point lighting. You could do it all with spotlights, but I like to talk about directional light because that's the easiest light to work with. Spotlight is a very focused light, and then ambient light is very good for giving kind of what I call a hidden light, allowing you to illuminate things just to kind of make them look better or sharper. The backlight is meant to, here's another cool feature with the light thing. Go back to my camera, turn on my IPR. What the light editor also can do is I have this off switch, so I can turn that off and then maybe even turn off my directional light and just look how this one's going to hit, right? So she looks way more mysterious with just one light on. By turning on each light, different things happen, right? So the backlight is meant to kind of separate her, and if I can pull that up a little higher, we'll back more. It's meant to kind of pull off the highlight, separate her from the background. If I turn that back on, turn that back on, hit IPR. All right, I can see, even if it's dark, I still get this trace of a line, which helps her stand out. And then when I activate the directional light, everything comes back on. Okay. Right, and everything gets nice and illuminated now. I might turn off this, turn this intensity way up. Now that I have a decay on it. Let me just check that. I'm going to turn both of these off. So there's a lot of experimenting that happens, and that's what you should be doing. And I'm just wanting to get that tip. Maybe I'll do this side. Nope, I'll do this side. There. I want the light to hit this piece of her right here, which is going to help illuminate it. Okay. Oops. Back to IPR time. Now that I have 3 lights set up, I'm going to mess with the color. So now I wanted to kind of get to a color I feel. What I noticed in class was people were picking the exact same colors I was. Feel free to kind of mess with it, but you don't want big, bright colors. You usually tone them down. So if I wanted to even keep these colors, I would kind of pull this red, purplish red to more of a white purplish red, and maybe I'll keep the blue to a light blue over here, just making these subtle colors. And then this one I'd like to turn to like some sort of warmer yellow, like how it's cresting, like there's light behind, like there's a sunrise behind her or something. So now if I look at it, I get this one over the detail thing. Another thing that's going to happen with Maya, so now it looks like there's kind of sun hitting from behind her, but we can still see her with the other 2 lights. So it's a heavily backlit shot. Something else with Maya rendering is you might notice there's some angular shots. Maya is really rendering it like that in one mode. And so you can't really tell the difference too much. This is semi-high poly. But if I wanted those softer edges, in Maya, I would have to smooth it. So in object mode, I'd have to go to render. I'd have to go to mesh. I have to get out of rendering mode, back to modeling, choose mesh and smooth. And that should do it in one mode. That's pretty smooth. Hit IPR now. Okay, that is my Maya render. Oh, I didn't talk about settings. Let's get this Maya render to reflect exactly what I'm seeing here. So I'm going to go to Window, Rendering Editors, Render Settings. I'm going to start off with Maya software. I'm going to change this to JPEG. I'm going to call this Maya. Actually, I'm just going to test. This actually isn't one I'm going to be rendering out, but I do want to switch this to my HD 1080, and I do want to go to Maya software and change this to production quality. Okay, and that's going to give me a little bit better of an IPR. Now I can go back to rendering, and I can there's a couple ways I can render out this image. I could go to render, and the render settings right there, but I had to get off my and I can also render this current frame. I don't think I have anything in the options to choose, so I'm going to choose render current frame, and it's going to send it out into the IPR. Actually, it's different. There's IPR and there's render view. So right now I'm in the render view. That looks not like the right size. And why isn't it doing there? Okay. And if I like this image, I'm going to go File, Save this image, and I'm going to call it Maya Software IQ, or Maya HQ, and then your last name. This is your test render for Maya, and hit Desktop and Save. And now, let me do one thing. Let me just check. Was it on camera? Huh. Okay. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to Arnold. So what's going to happen is I'm going to switch to my Arnold renderer, and a lot of these lights are going to go to pot. So they're going to be too dark for Arnold. So if I go back to a render and choose render using Arnold, and now if I hit IPR, it's very dark. It's there, it's just very dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank up some of these settings, and let me see if I can make it happen in real time. So let me see. Oh, render settings. There we go. Let me render that current frame again. Oh, let me be in my IPR one more time. That's my 1080 frame. And this is where I got lost in befuddled. If I zoom that out, if I hit zoom out, there it goes. That is in 1080. File, that's how I skipped that one step. So sorry. Maya HQ last name. Yes. Yes. Just overriding that. So one thing you had to do is go render, and when it says test resolution, check off render settings. That is the detail I missed in class. So there you have it, instead of camera panel. Okay. Now I'm going to render using Arnold. And when that gets kicked in and I choose renderer and choose render current frame, it's too dark. I believe I'm going to try having it on simultaneously. We'll see. Let's switch this to attribute editor and now shove it off to the side. Very good. Let's see what happens when I increase the brightness of these three lights. Panel perspective. I'm just going to be grabbing each. Let's start with the spotlight. And if I increase this intensity to like 250, and then I hit IPR. Oh, it looks like I lost my. What if I hit IPR up here? What if I close this and hit IPR? And we're getting to my lost image again. So I'm going to stop. All right. I did the Maya HQ render. Oops, no, wrong. The Maya HQ render out, and I saved that image. And now I'm going to also do an Arnold render out. So I've deleted the lights just because I had that render problem. I'm going to start again. So I have the Arnold. I'm going to do an area light. And this box, it's kind of like a hybrid between your spotlight and your point light, but it's meant to be used with Arnold. I'm going to go to my light editor. I'm going to increase my intensity. Let me hit 7. I'm going to crank that up. I'm going to give it a nice, I'm going to give it a bluish tone. I've been liking that bluish tone. I'm actually going to give it a bright blue at first so I can see where it's hitting and landing. And sometimes with these lights, you got to really crank it to like 50. The closer you get, the stronger it's going to be on the character. So you can also increase your exposure. And if you have to go to the attribute editor, you can actually decrease your shadow intensity which is defaulted on. And let's see. Boop. I think that's all I need to cover. You can actually change your specular from the light, how shiny you want a light or how less shiny you want a light, and which is different than the specular map. So I'm turning that down, and I want to get my bump map up a little. I think I just want to change my bump map. I mellowed it out, and I want to mellow it back. Let me hit that. Oops, excuse me. Sorry. Oops, should be editor. Back to my bump map. Yeah. Choose that file again. Let's go down. It's going to be bump. That one, thank you. There you go. Okay. Oh, it is there. Okay. I'm in my camera view, but I can adjust this where I want this to go. Feel free to give yourself 1 or 2 lights. Another feature of Arnold is they have this wonderful sky dome. So instead of building the sphere and turning it inside out, you can hit sky dome, and it'll default to this giant sphere. And then I could I could give it a color, or I can give it a picture. And you could actually use an HDRI to actually reflect something. And we're just going to go with those stars. Which stars did I have? Sorry, there's too many. Let's do those. The stars are actually, the colors are generating the light. And so when I render this in Arnold view, the actual map, these colors and everything are actually generating points of light for her to shine on. So that's a little dark. Like I said, Arnold does render out dark. I would like to do 2 lights crossing it. So I'm going to get this one a little higher. Actually, I might make it, let's try some underlighting. So I'm going to turn it down, pull it over, under and side. Something like that. How's that looking? And then I'm going to make a second light. So I'm going to go to Arnold lights, another area light, pull that over, pull that back, pull that around. And I can actually scale this to be a smaller point light and then maybe even increase the intensity. So you can change the shape of the light. I'm going to give this a yellow. Actually, I'm going to make this one bigger. This nice a big yellow swath on the other side. I'm going to increase the exposure of that light. Yeah, some glow like that. And then let's see, can I make this a dark blue? Yeah. And then always test to IPR. I'm going to make sure that I am using Arnold and I am using the render settings to the camera. And now I'm going to hit IPR. Ooh, that's looking good. Now, it's not done yet, so it takes a lot longer to kind of scan through. It kind of pinpoints and finds certain things. I'm going to zoom out and make this window a little smaller so you can see that it's done. And there's my IPR render. I'm going to hit IPR one more time. Refresh it. Let it do its thing. It's sampling each little point. All right, and then I can hit File and Save Image, and I'm going to make it a JPEG, and this time I'm going to call it Arnold HQ and your last name. So you have 2 different light sets. What I'm looking for is just that you tried it differently. I can kind of tell when something gets Arnold. You can kind of see some specs sometimes, and usually one's a little steeper. So I have my Arnold render. Ooh, that rendered out much darker. I'm going to do that again. And I have my Maya render, which kind of, the top light was a little too bright on that. So again, it's called the lab. So if this is what you're happy with, go ahead and turn it in. I'm going to tinker with that a little bit more just to kind of show you. So even though it looked good on the IPR, it did not look good on the final render. It's a couple things going on. It was probably due to it being a JPEG. Get that a little higher. And then how is that looking? Oops, that's my Maya. And let's make that a little higher. And maybe even more intense. Something like that. And now let's see how this is going to look. Even brighter here. Let that kind of see it's spotting all the little What it does is it hits the first 10-25% of the render pretty quickly, and then it spends a lot more time getting the minutia. And I'm going to hit File, Save Image, and then I'm going to go call that Arnold AdvAnim again. I'm going to replace it and hit OK. And you can review the tape if you want, but that is going to be much brighter. There it goes. So some of the Arnold, you could do higher sampling rates, right? So this is a problem with Arnold where it's going to come in this little fuzzy. It didn't get all the photon samples there, but that looks cool compared to the Maya render. Again, the Maya render, the top light came out a little too hot, and it looks like I needed to tune down the shininess. But that's basically what we did for the render lab. Turn both of those pictures in. All right.